My teacher subjected me and my entire family to relentless bullying. In response, I devised a revenge scheme of epic proportions, pushing her to the brink where she physically assaulted me, causing my lip to bleed and forcing me to smile amidst the pain. What followed is the tale of how I systematically dismantled my teacher's life. Here's what transpired. Subscribe to AmITheA on YouTube and remember to hit the notification bell to stay updated. The setting for this narrative is a quaint, small town, where the local school had been a cornerstone of the community for 70 years. Both my father and grandfather were alumni of this venerable institution, and it was known for nurturing successful individuals. Furthermore, the school was renowned for its philanthropic initiatives and offered exceptional retirement benefits to its educators, contingent upon their years of service. My great-grandfather had even contributed to the school's construction and served on its advisory board during its early days. The school had historically been an all-boys institution until 1996 when it welcomed its first co-ed class, evolving into a fully integrated school. With a sprawling campus split across 2 buildings, one housed kindergarten through 5th grade, while the other accommodated 6th through 12th graders. Now, let's commence with part 1, Teacher versus Dad. The central figure of this incident is a teacher we shall refer to as MD. She had been my father's math teacher when he embarked on his high school journey. Despite her impressive academic qualifications, a recent graduate with a teaching degree and a master's in math and chemistry, MD was plagued by a sour demeanor. Her classroom demanded a rigid posture, with students required to sit in a ready mode, back straight, legs together, hands neatly folded in their laps, clutching only the necessary textbook and pencil for jotting marginal notes. Upon her entrance, students were expected to greet her with a polite, "Good morning," or "Good afternoon." To make matters more arduous, MD frequently assigned copious weekend homework, tightly regulated students' access to water, and strictly controlled restroom usage, necessitating pupils to raise their hands and await her permission. Complaints from disgruntled students were abundant, yet, given her status as the most qualified teacher at the school board turned a blind eye, arguing that such measures were essential to instilling discipline. However, this was only the tip of the iceberg. MD's examinations were notorious for their sheer difficulty, and, given her classroom's demographic of rambunctious teenage boys, she was frequently interrupted by chatter. A single disruption prompted her to cease teaching, often neglecting entire sections of chemistry content. This practice invariably threw the entire class into a state of panic as they self-studied furiously before finals. My father, who ended up with a score of 41, breathed a sigh of relief as the passing grade stood at 40. His relief, however, was short-lived as he scrutinized his exam paper, uncovering a miscalculation. With corrected math, his score amounted to 49. Bravely, he raised his hand and waited, seemingly an eternity, before MD acknowledged him. He then courteously pointed out the error in his exam totaling. This constructive criticism surprisingly offended MD. She dismissed him with an assumption of her mathematical infallibility as a holder of a master's degree. In response, my father courageously left his desk, an action strictly forbidden, and approached MD's desk to rectify his error. Witnessing this, MD's face reddened with anger and frustration. She retorted that the math error had been corrected, though this did not justify his actions, and she deducted 10 points from his final grade. The class, initially relieved at the prospect of a higher grade, was suddenly filled with dread, while my father, in disbelief, saw his score reduced to 39, thereby failing the course. In a bid to prevent further escalation, he chose not to challenge her decision but instead retrieved his final exam, packed his bag, and exited the classroom. He reported the injustice to my great-grandfather, who served on the school board, though regrettably, no actions were taken as grades were solely at the discretion of the teacher. My father, in his perspective, accepted his loss and decided against seeking revenge, believing it not to be worth the effort. He transferred to a different class, discontinuing his relationship with MD altogether. Part 2, Teacher versus My Brother and Me. My younger brother, 2 years my junior, had just started high school, enrolling in the chemistry class, which happened to be taught by MD. During this period, the school was undergoing renovations, and the library was being refurbished. Consequently, a teacher was designated to supervise the younger students in the library. Unfortunately, my younger brother's class was assigned MD as their chaperone. My father had issued me specific instructions to be cautious around MD, and I remained vigilant. Regrettably, my younger brother was unaware of the impending storm. The school's library allowed students to borrow any 2 books of their choice for the summer break. My brother selected an Enid Blyton storybook and a guide titled Backyard Science Experiments. Both my brother and I excelled in science-related topics, and he was eagerly anticipating conducting exciting science experiments at home with my assistance. As he walked past MD on his way to the librarian, he was unexpectedly intercepted by MD. Confusion washed over him as MD inquired about the books he carried. After my brother explained that one was a storybook and the other was Backyard Science Experiments, MD abruptly dismissed his choice, declaring that he lacked the knowledge to utilize the latter. She stated that the book should be left for someone more capable, confiscating it from my brother's hands. The other library staff nervously chuckled in response to MD's judgment, compounding my brother's embarrassment. When my brother approached me in tears, I was livid. I was a prominent student at school, known for my accomplishments in quizzes, debates, and national competitions. My friends and I had garnered a collection of trophies with our names engraved on them. Most of the teachers held us in high regard, and the vice principal was on a first-name basis with us, frequently accompanying us to competitions. Thus, when my brother recounted his ordeal, I was bewildered. Uncertain of the most appropriate response, I proceeded to the library and obtained another copy of the Backyard Science Experiments book to console my brother. However, I believe that to be the extent of the issue. To provide a supplementary anecdote, during the summer, our school hosted a science summit. My friends and I secured awards for our outstanding achievements. We designed the most efficient hydraulic gear-based pulley system and boasted the second fastest chemical fuel race boat. These victories were celebrated at a school assembly upon our return from summer break. Upon returning to school, I found myself enrolled in MD's chemistry class, which occurred directly after the assembly. This was the context in which the incident unfolded. Our chemistry lab was facilitated by MD, and she was in the process of setting up an experiment designed to release hydrochloric acid fumes into a gas flask. Despite her procedural error, the experiment failed to initiate a reaction. Instead of rectifying the situation, MD inexplicably concluded that the experiment's success depended on the Bunsen burner's intensity. Disregarding the potential hazards, she activated the burner at maximum capacity, resulting in the collection of hydrochloric acid fumes for an excessive duration. These fumes are toxic when inhaled for an extended period. Finally, satisfied with the outcome, MD hoisted the flask to present it to the class. However, in a disconcerting turn of events, she elected to open the flask dangerously close to a female classmate. Inquiring about the pungency of the fumes, MD prompted the girl to take a whiff, and the girl, in a reflexive gesture, recoiled. It was evident to me that the girl's reaction was not an acknowledgement of any pungent odor but rather a response to potential harm. I don't know why I did it, but at that moment, I snorted loudly. MD instantly zooms in on me, walking toward me with her face contorting into an ugly expression, and she goes, "Something funny you'd care to share with us?" I knew I messed up, but I was also angry. This person in front of me had bullied my younger brother and my dad. I remembered that, and suddenly all my verbal senses were shut down. I told her, "You and I both know that she didn't smell anything pungent. That experiment you just did was a failure." "Oh, you think you know more than me?" She turned to the class. "He thinks he knows more than me. You know what? I'll step down. Why don't you teach the class, Professor Opie?" I said, "Oh, absolutely," to the absolute shock of everyone watching. I walked up to the podium and, while maintaining eye contact with MD, I said, "First thing to remember, class, turn to experiment 1 in your lab textbook. Read the warnings. The gas is pungent and also poison. How dare you, as no one taught you manners. This is no roadside shack, and you will do well to remember that, else you're going to have a couple of broken bones." This was originally in a different language, but if you want the exact translation, it was, "I'll break your limbs and feed them to you." She is absolutely furious, grabs me by the hand, and proceeds to drag me to the principal's office. On the way there, we cross the vice principal's office, and he sees MD dragging me away and runs out. The vice principal says, "What's going on here?" Before I can say anything, MD starts ranting to him about how disrespectful and unacceptable my class behavior is and is heaving by the end of her spiel. The VP gives me a searching look and then responds with, "Go back to class, MD. I'll deal." We head back to his office, and he offers me a seat and a glass of water. Then he says, "Now, what actually happened in class, OP?" He asks, "What's the sigh?" I tell him exactly what happened. Once he hears my side of the story, he looks at me incredulously and asks me if I really went to the podium and started lecturing the class. I look up and see the gobsmacked look on the VP's normally reserved face. Imagine someone who looks like a male Minerva McGonagall being completely shocked. I couldn't stop myself. I started with a snicker, which then turned into full-blown laughter. I laughed until my stomach hurt and my eyes teared up. To my surprise, the vice principal was also smiling wildly at that. He shook his head and then reversed his expression. I know what happened had you concerned for class safety, but that is no reason for such disruptive behavior. Aside from that, I'm gonna personally investigate what happened in that class, and if MD is found to be intentionally forcing students to inhale harmful chemicals, she will be sacked immediately. Oh, and you're supposed to hand over a written apology to MD about this behavior. Now, get moving. I sighed and headed back to class, and I really thought that I had ended MD's career. Oh, how wrong I was. She changed her story so it looked like she had purposely done the experiment wrong and was about to reprimand that girl for inhaling what could have been a harmful chemical. MD pulled one on me and had me look like I was just an insolent child who thought that he knew everything by reading a chapter of the book. And here I stopped myself. This event was me just going in head-on with the teacher who had been in the school for longer than 35 years. Which brings us to part 3, pro-revenge mode. Now I knew that I wanted to help my brother, but I needed to get rid of her. My dad knew about what happened in school and he wanted me to not engage with MD. He said it wasn't worth it. But by now, I was in the game. She had played her card, it was my turn. Now I don't know what made it so that she had such a problem with my dad and my younger brother. They were quiet and hard-working students. I felt she had something against our family, and I was convinced that my younger brother would have to deal with problems if I somehow messed up and got expelled or made a worse enemy out of MD. This was war, and I had a new plan. I started to act really sheepish around her and made it a point to stay back after class and ask her questions in the most polite way possible. I was the kid who was guilty of not understanding the plans of elders. I portrayed myself as an amazing student who MD had succeeded in humbling. I slowly but surely made my way into the category best described by the term, bootlicker. It hurt me inside to do it, but with what I had planned, if this went well, it made me lightheaded with anticipation. I was in it to win it. I conceded defeat in a fight to win the war. 2 years later, I'm in junior year, my brother just started high school, and he was taking the chemistry class with MD. I was the highest scorer in chemistry and was a pet to MD. She had started to like the version of me that I had portrayed and made me the lab assistant for that year. 2 of my best friends knew what I had planned. Everyone else in the class hated me for being the teacher's pet and getting straight A's when the next highest grade was a B-. Everything was going according to plan. On the first day of class, I replaced her stool, one of the three-legged ones with a broken stool. This was supposed to be the first in a series of pranks that would hit her that day. She came to class and went to take her seat, and boy, she fell. Well, she somehow hit her hand on the wall and cried out. Yep, that must have hurt. She was definitely overweight. And it couldn't be traced back to me. I smiled on the inside as I rushed to her and helped her back up. I ran and fetched her another chair while inside the freshmen were trying their best not to laugh. When I got back from the room that had the extra stools, I walked into the side of her, screaming like a banshee. But what got me furious was that she was screaming at my younger brother. Apparently, she had said something like, "Stupid tools," and "Stupid lab assistant falls," to which my brother had responded with, "It's not my brother's fault you're too heavy for the stool." Though I loved him for it, he really needed to learn when to come to my aid. But then I didn't do much. I just replaced the chair while silently trying to communicate to my brother to calm down. Nothing else of concern happened that day until the time when school was over, and the teachers were heading back. Stage 2 was in motion. We heard a loud bang, and immediately the large crowd of students nearby all headed towards the teacher's car parking lot. We saw MD's car smoking, and the exhaust blown right off. Keep in mind that it was an older car, and we had decided to block off the exhaust with clay. Clay that had hardened over the course of 6 hours on a sunny day. Well, that car had to be towed, and she went home with some other students that day. She didn't show up to school for 2 days after that, but she did show up to school on the third day, which was a half-school day because our country celebrates Teachers' Day. It is a tradition that students go to their teachers, current and old, and wish them the best, give them cards, gifts, etc. This was by far the most ambitious prank pulled in the school that I know of. The 2 days she was absent, we went around telling everyone not to visit her on Teachers' Day. It helped a lot that my friends and I were some of the most popular people in school, and with the other cool guys and girls agreeing to that, we spread the word and got confirmation that no one from the entire class in my year was going to wish her well on Teachers' Day. It was the most amazing feeling of accomplishment I have ever had. She had made the situation herself by being the nastiest person I've ever seen. It was no surprise people were fine with doing this to her. For the first time in 70 years in our school, a teacher had not a single well-wisher on Teachers' Day. Well, things are never perfect, and as it so happened, word of what had conspired got to her the next day. I had just set up the lab, the freshmen were getting settled in, and here comes MD, anger radiating from her in waves. She walks up to me, and I get the hardest slap I have ever gotten in my life, right across my face. I hate to admit it, but that left a blue mark on my cheek, and my nose and lip were bleeding. My younger brother, who saw that happen, ran towards me. But my shock slowly subsided, and I smiled a bloody smile that probably scared him. I told him to get the vice principal. 20 minutes later, I was in the school emergency room with a nurse wiping my lip and holding a cloth to my nose. The vice principal comes in with the principal and 2 cops in tow. They tell me my parents have been informed and ask me if I would like to talk about it now or when my parents are here. I say that I can answer their questions as soon as I get my lip bandaged. So I tell them about the cases of bullying against my brother and me and also tell them that she is a really incompetent teacher. I tell the principal that he could check the school average in science subjects, and sure as I guessed, the average score in the national exams of physics and biology scores came in at 92 and 90, with chemistry at a surprising 79. Topping that off with the sole charges, she lost her license to teach 2 years before she retired, and with that, she lost amazing retirement benefits that the school offered her. Her car also had no insurance. Ha, that's not all, though. One could ask what could be worse. Well, consider this. The fall she had off the stool ended up with her going to the hospital for an X-ray of her wrist and hip that she suspected might have been broken. While the wrist sure had a hairline fracture, the hip was fine. But while the X-ray showed another thing, I don't think it's normal for anyone to laugh when someone is diagnosed with stage 3 cancer, but I did. Also, I later met with her only living family member, her nephew, who had long cut all contact with her but had been contacted by the police in the hospital. That's where I found out the truth. Well, I never could have guessed what I found out there. MD's mom was my great-granddad's niece through my great-granddad's younger brother, who had stolen money from the family and tried to kill my great-granddad. He was disowned, and no one knew this entire time. Not that anyone would care, I'm just happy that this nasty woman is out of our lives for good this time because apparently, she died last year with no one by her side. So, am I the fool for how I got my revenge? This revenge went deep, and when he coordinated everyone not to visit her on Teacher's Day, he must have known that something was in the come of that. But he probably didn't expect it to be getting his lip busted by his own teacher. I have a feeling that the entire revenge plan was probably going to be a bit more elaborate than this, but when she swung on him, he didn't have to execute his plan any further. That was it, he showed it to the vice principal and the principal. The police come, she loses everything, her retirement, her current license, and this entire war they've been waging between the two of them. One thing I did wonder is what language the expression that she used comes from. I'll break your limbs and feed them to you. If anyone knows what language that originally comes from, let me know down below because I'm sure it probably just translates weird over to English but sounds more natural in the native language. As unlikable as the teacher was throughout this entire thing, I'm sure she probably was really hurt when nobody came to visit her on Teacher's Day. Not nobody in that one grade, but nobody at all. She might have even cried when that happened. And when she found out who caused it, that fear and sadness of nobody being there turned into anger, and anger leads to hate, and hate leads to suffering. Ultimately, she suffered quite a lot at the end of this because after it was all said and done, with no family, no retirement, no vindication, and she had to deal with this assault charge, she ended up getting cancer and then died. I can't fathom why I did it, but in that moment, I emitted a boisterous snort. MD immediately focused her attention on me, striding over with a twisted, unpleasant expression etched upon her face. She interrogated me, "Do you find something amusing that you'd like to share?" I recognized my misstep, but my anger overcame my apprehension. This individual had tormented both my younger brother and my father, and their memories flashed before me, momentarily silencing my internal dialogue. I retorted, "Both you and I are well aware that there was no noxious odor. The experiment you conducted was an unequivocal failure." She challenged, "Do you believe your knowledge surpasses mine?" She turned to the class and scornfully added, "He believes he's more knowledgeable than I am." "Well, why don't you take charge, Professor Opie?" Without hesitation, I replied, "Certainly," a response that left everyone watching astounded. I strode to the podium, maintaining unwavering eye contact with MD. I addressed the class, advising them to turn to Experiment 1 in their lab textbook and read the warnings. I reminded them that the gas was both noxious and poisonous. I inquired, "How dare you? Basic decorum seems beyond your grasp. This is not some roadside shack. I implore you to remember that, or you may soon find yourselves nursing broken bones." The content of my statement was initially in a different language, but if you require an exact translation, it meant, "I'll break your limbs and feed them to you." MD seethed with fury, seized my hand, and dragged me to the principal's office. En route, we passed by the vice principal's office, and he observed MD escorting me forcibly. He emerged and inquired, "What's happening here?" MD embarked on a diatribe, highlighting my disrespectful and intolerable behavior during the class. The vice principal scrutinized me and then addressed MD, instructing her to return to her duties and assuring her that he would handle the matter. We re-entered his office, where he offered me a seat and a glass of water. He inquired about the events in class and sought to understand my perspective. After I narrated the sequence of events, he wore a bemused expression. Astonishingly, my account left him wide-eyed, resembling a male version of Minerva McGonagall, genuinely astonished by the story. Overwhelmed by the absurdity of it all, I began to chuckle, gradually evolving into hearty laughter that brought tears to my eyes and aching to my stomach. To my astonishment, the vice principal, too, wore an exuberant grin. He shook his head and then transitioned to a more serious demeanor. He acknowledged that my actions stemmed from genuine concerns for the safety of the class but emphasized that such disruptive behavior was unjustifiable. Moreover, he informed me that he would personally investigate the incidents within the class. If MD were found to have intentionally exposed students to harmful chemicals, she would be dismissed immediately. He also instructed me to pen a written apology to MD for my behavior and urged me to depart. I exhaled, returned to class, and naively believed that I had brought an end to MD's career. I could not have been more mistaken. MD contrived a narrative that portrayed her experiment failure as intentional, framing her actions as an attempt to admonish the girl for inhaling potentially hazardous chemicals. She had succeeded in undermining me, depicting me as a disrespectful student who believed himself knowledgeable after merely reading a chapter in the textbook. This event marked my head-on confrontation with a teacher who had spent over 35 years at the school. This leads us to part 3, pro-revenge mode. With a newfound determination, I sought to aid my brother while resolving to eliminate MD from our lives. My father had been aware of the ongoing issues but had initially discouraged my involvement, deeming it unworthy of pursuit. However, the tide had turned, and it was my turn to act. I adopted a facade of meekness in MD's presence, often lingering after class to post polite inquiries. I projected the image of a model student who had been humbled by MD's tutelage, gradually evolving into a teacher's pet. It pained me to adopt this facade, but it was a strategic decision, aligning with a more comprehensive plan to win the ultimate battle. I conceded defeat in the short term, with a grander design in mind. 2 years later, during my junior year, my younger brother commenced high school, enrolling in MD's chemistry class. I had achieved the highest scores in chemistry and had firmly established myself as MD's favored pupil. She had appointed me as the lab assistant for the year, a position that earned me the disdain of my peers, who viewed me as the teacher's pet, consistently earning straight A's in a class where the next highest grade was a B-. The plan was in motion. On the first day of class, I subtly substituted MD's stool with a rickety, 3-legged one. This act marked the inaugural step in a series of pranks set to unravel throughout the day. MD arrived and unsuspectingly took her seat, resulting in her toppling from the unstable stool. In the process, she collided with the wall and let out a cry of pain. The fall was undoubtedly distressing for her, and it passed without a trace of my involvement. I sprang into action, rushing to her aid, securing another chair from an adjacent room. Upon my return, I inadvertently collided with the side of her chair, vocalizing a loud, exaggerated scream. My fury, however, was provoked when I heard her berate my younger brother. She had made comments like, "stupid tools," and "stupid lab assistant falls," prompting my brother to retort, "It's not my brother's fault the stool couldn't support your weight." Although I admired his defense of me, he needed to discern the appropriate moments for intervention. I chose not to retaliate further and instead discreetly signaled my brother to remain composed. The remainder of the day proceeded without noteworthy incidents until the school concluded and the teachers departed. The second stage of my plan unfolded with a resounding crash emanating from MD's car in the teacher's parking lot. Her vehicle was enveloped in a cloud of smoke, and the exhaust pipe had detached. We had tampered with her exhaust system by blocking it with clay, which had solidified during the sunny hours. Her car required towing, and she departed with other students that day. She remained absent from school for 2 days following the incident, only to reappear on the third day, coinciding with Teachers' Day, a celebration in our country. This day involved students extending well wishes, presenting cards and gifts to their teachers, past and present. This episode represented one of the most ambitious pranks ever executed within the school. During her 2-day absence, my friends and I urged fellow students not to visit her on Teachers' Day. With the support of the popular students and the cool crowd, We spread the word extensively, securing unanimous agreement among our peers that no one from our year would extend Teacher's Day greetings to her. The sense of accomplishment and fulfillment we experienced was unparalleled. However, word eventually reached MD regarding our collective decision, and she was informed the next day. I was busy setting up the lab, while freshmen adjusted to their surroundings when MD, seething with rage, appeared. She approached me and delivered the most profound slap I had ever received, leaving a bruise on my cheek and causing my nose and lip to bleed. Witnessing the incident, my younger brother rushed to my side. Gradually, my initial shock gave way to a bloody smile that likely unsettled my brother. I instructed him to summon the vice principal. 20 minutes later, I found myself in the school's emergency room, with a nurse tending to my lip and applying a cloth to my nose. The vice principal entered the room, accompanied by the principal and 2 police officers. They informed me that my parents had been notified and inquired whether I was prepared to provide a statement. I suggested that they pose their questions after tending to my lip. I proceeded to recount the instances of bullying perpetrated against my brother and me, emphasizing MD's incompetence as a teacher. I urged the principal to scrutinize the school's average scores in science subjects, which revealed conspicuously high averages in physics and biology, while chemistry trailed at a surprising 79. Furthermore, I disclosed that MD had lost her teaching license 2 years before her retirement, leading to the forfeiture of her generous retirement benefits. Her uninsured car further compounded her losses. Surprisingly, an X-ray conducted following her fall from the stool uncovered an unexpected revelation. I found it difficult to suppress my laughter when she received a stage 3 cancer diagnosis. Subsequently, I had a conversation with her sole living relative, her nephew, who had severed all ties with her but was contacted by the police at the hospital. It was during this meeting that I learned the truth. To my astonishment, MD's familial connection traced back to my great-grandfather's niece, through my great-grandfather's younger brother. This estranged uncle had embezzled family funds and attempted to harm my great-grandfather, resulting in his disownment. Until this revelation, no one had been aware of this connection, although it held little significance. I rejoiced in the knowledge that this hostile individual had been permanently removed from our lives. Regrettably, she passed away last year, without a single person by her side. Now, having learned the entire story, one must ponder whether my revenge was justified or excessive. Please share your thoughts in the "fool or not a fool" section and provide your rationale. If you enjoyed this story, remember to subscribe and activate notifications by clicking the bell icon to continue listening to the entire series. Access the playlist featured in the description above.